I have a whole bunch of wonderful PowerPoint slides that I'm going to show you this way. These are the books I've published so far. There's 5 of them in the Strange Files series. Oh, I'm supposed to record this. My wife wants to monitor me to make sure I don't do too many uhs and ahs in between. I'm going to be working on my elocution here with you. When you sign up for this, they say, well, what book do you want to present? And I'm going to be presenting one of the 5 books in the Strange Files series. It's called Strange Currents. A couple of years ago, it was named the best mystery in Florida by the Florida Writers Association in their annual Royal Palm Literary Awards. But I'm also going to talk just a little bit about writing process, because a question I often get from people is, well, how do you set about writing a book, and what's your process? How do you about doing that? And I thought it'd be kind of interesting because I spend a lot of time every year going to the International Thriller Writers Convention in New York. I've met an awful lot of authors, and we talk a lot about process. And so I'll just share a couple of things. The overarching thing, I'm not going to pick my laptop up and show you, but when you talk to writers, they fall into 2 broad categories: plotters, P-L-O-T-T-E-R-S, not plotters, and pantsers. Pantsers coming from writing from the seat of your pants. Okay? So a classic plotter would be James Patterson. You know, he thoroughly outlines all of his books. This is James Patterson's actual outline for his book Honeymoon. I don't know if anybody has read that, but it's 26 pages. Every chapter is completely detailed. If you read through this outline and then read the book, there are no surprises. It's all in his outline, so when you see James Patterson and somebody else's name on the books, that's how it works, because once you get this from James Patterson, you know the whole story, and there you go. You start from there. Then again, there are writers like Lee Child. Do we all know who Lee Child is, the Jack Reacher series? Well, Lee Child is famous for not plotting at all. In fact, his line is, just start writing. Something will happen. The outline is going to be built into your subconscious. He tells a famous story. It's a wonderful story. In one of his books, he presented the manuscript to his editor, who read through it and said, you know, if you would change chapter, and I'm making up the chapter numbers, chapter 13 and chapter 17, the chronology would make more sense. And Lee said, yep, you're right. He said, oh, good, so you're going to do it? He says, no. He says, well, why not? He says, because that's not how it happened. You know, when he's writing, a movie is playing in his head, and he's writing the movie as it plays out in his mind. He doesn't know what his characters are going to do. He doesn't know what's going to happen in the next sentence, and that's the thrill of writing that way. And that's kind of my writing style, too. I have a general idea of where I'm going to go, but I really don't know what my characters are going to do. And it's fun, because it's actually better than reading a book or writing a movie, because I'm creating this movie as I go along, and it's all coming out of my subconscious. So I mentioned the International Thriller Writers Association. Every year they call their best first sentence contest. And so if you're one of the people who sign up for their master classes, each of the published authors who runs these classes nominates a best first sentence that's been submitted from a writer who's got a work in progress. Well, for this book, I submitted a first sentence, and Robert Dugani, do you guys know who Robert Dugani is? He's a pretty well-known thriller writer, liked it, and it won the best first sentence contest. And I'll tell you what my best first sentence was. I knew my number was up when the flamingo stepped on my face. Now, when I wrote that, I wrote it just so I could win that contest. I had no idea what kind of book I was going to write after that, but I realized, you know, I'm going to show up at this convention and I've got to have a manuscript in process. I better start writing a book. And I realized, you know, that's kind of a fun way to start a book. Just do that, then figure out, well, where does that go? What happens with that? And this book, as it turns out, you know, won first place in as best mystery in Florida. Another book that I wrote introduces my main character in a series of books. His name is Alexander Strange. He started out as a journalist in Arizona, and he makes his way to Florida when the newspaper he worked for in Arizona folds. And he's traveling to Florida, and he really needs to get here. He really needs to get down. He's got this friend in Gainesville. By the way, part of this book is set at the Devil's Millhopper here in Gainesville. A big chunk of this book is set right here in Gainesville. His friend is in trouble. She's being blackmailed. He's got to get here. He's desperate to get to Florida. And so the sentence I wrote to start the book was, I wanted to get to Florida in the worst way, so I arrived in a coffin. So how does he get in a coffin? Why is he in a coffin? Well, it turns out his car breaks down and he gets picked up by a hearse that's delivering embalming fluid to Pensacola, okay? But I didn't know that when I wrote that sentence. I had no idea when that was going to go. And so it's kind of fun to do a writing prompt like that. Another book that also just won this past year gold medal for Best Mystery is called Get Strange. And in this case, rather than a sort of like a snappy first sentence, I decided to sort of create a scene setter. Alexander Strange lives on a converted fishing trawler. And this fishing trawler, as it turns out, is up on bricks and oil cans because there's a gigantic hole in its hull. So this guy's living on a grounded fishing trawler in the little town of Goodland, Florida. And I don't know if you've ever been to Goodland. It's right outside of Naples. It's on Marco Island. There's a wonderful bar there called Stan's Idle Hour. It's one of the great bars in Collier County. But anyway, I started the book off like this. The killers boogered up the first attempt on my life when they poisoned my fried okra. They mistakenly assumed the vegetable would end up on my dinner plate. Negatory. I'd rather eat sushi than okra, and I'll be starving during the zombie apocalypse before I eat raw fish. But my dog Fred loves okra. He doesn't care if it has the texture of snot. Spoiler alert, Fred's fine.
Oh, good.
Fred's fine. Fred takes one sniff of that okra and says, no, I don't like this. And then Alexander Strange smells it and realizes, it kind of tastes, it kind of smells like burnt almonds. We all know what burnt almonds is?
Cyanide.
Cyanide, right, and that's how they try to kill him. So, anyway, that's how that book got started. So, right now I'm going to give you this is a preview of my next book. My next book that I'm writing now, I'm 17,000 words in, is set in Naples, Florida, where I live. It's set around Christmas time, and it's another scene setter opening, and Alexander Strange is on his boat in a marina in Goodland. Here's how it begins. I was reclining on the poop deck, admiring the twinkling Christmas lights reflecting on the glassy surface of the marina, when staccato bursts from an assault rifle shattered the stillness of the evening. And why not? Nothing speaks to the birth of the Messiah like a few rounds from an AR-15 aimed heavenward. It's Florida. It wouldn't be proper holiday without fireworks and celebratory gunplay. So that's how we start the next book, which I haven't got a title for yet. I think it's Christmas Tidings, but I'm not sure. We'll see. All in all, there's 5 books in my series. It starts off with Strange Files, and I named the whole series that. The next book is Florida Man, Get Strange, Strange Currents, and that last book, the last book that I've written and completed is Mr. Manners. It also won a silver medal at the Florida Authors and Publishers Association. So I'll circle back then to Strange Currents, because what happened was, when I wrote that first sentence, I really and truly did not know where the book was going to go. Ultimately, it's set in Key West. It's a murder mystery. We have a dead scuba diver, and his sister believes that his death was not caused by natural causes, but in fact, he was murdered. She ends up contacting Alexander Strange and asking him to go down to Key West and see if he can solve the murder for her. So what do I do with all this flamingo stepping on his face? Where does that go? Here's the beginning of the book. We doing okay on time?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I knew my number was up when the flamingo stepped on my face. It wasn't the bird's fault. That's what I got for falling down in the middle of Duval Street. And she and her feathery cousins wouldn't have stampeded if the shotgun-toting douchebag hadn't let loose. To be fair, he wasn't shooting at the birds, he was aiming at me. With certain death at hand, your life is supposed to flash before your eyes. Not sure who returned from the afterlife to report on that, but what was passing before my eyes was a sea of magenta feathers, nasty little claws on webbed feet, and a steady spattering of flamingo doo-doo. It's not pink, by the way. Then came the humans dressed in boas, fake wings, and flip-flops. The flamingos were honking, the people were screaming. A fat guy wearing a lavender tutu plopped on top of me, rolled off and fled. He had the right idea. I jumped to my feet, ready to run as if my life depended on it, because it did. At the same time, I couldn't help but marvel at the spectacle I'd become part of, and how a few days earlier I'd been minding my own business aboard my fishing trawler when a woman named after a precious metal showed up. And so then chapter 2 is the woman arriving on the boat, concerned about the death of her brother. Now when I first wrote that, I thought I'd use it as a prologue, but then one of the writers, I think it was Meg Gardner, who was looking at my manuscript, said, you know what, don't do that, just make it your first chapter. And because that whole scene plays out at the end of the book, there's this climactic finish at a gunfight on Duval Street in Key West, and she says, you know, no, just make it your first chapter and then make the rest of the book a flashback. Look back at how he ended up at that situation on Duval Street with flamingos stampeding. By the way, the flamingos were all fine. The flamingos were injured in the writing of this book, so all is good. So,
Do you want to do some Q&As?
I would love to do some Q&A.
Yeah.
Yes?
So what's in the style of your journalistic writing that is aligned with your fiction writing?
Well, my character, you know, they say write what you know, and so when you know very little, that really narrows the field for me. But my character is a journalist. He is a millennial, and I have 2 millennial children who I borrow lots of dialogue from to try to make it seem at least somewhat genuine. He is the only full-time reporter in the entire planet who dedicates his life to the coverage of news of the weird. So, and he's located in Florida because this is the epicenter of weirdness for the entire galaxy.
Is this the type of journalism you did?
That's the type of journalism he does for an online news service. That's not the type of journalism I do. Although I would have loved to have done that for a living. If someone would have paid me to do that, I would absolutely have done that. So one of the things I did, one of the kind of the conceits of the book is I sprinkle most of the books with lots of his actual columns. He actually writes for an outfit called Tropic Press, which if you go to www.tropicpress.com, you'll see the website, you'll see his columns. The columns on the website are actual real columns about real weird Florida man kind of news. In the book, I kind of make them up a little bit to change the names to protect the guilty. But yeah, so that, you know, it does have kind of it is a journalism theme through the whole thing because that's what he does, and kind of a detective theme because he ends up functioning like an investigative journalist. And it is probably written with that kind of intellectual level, if that's not overstating it, of sort of newspaper writing style. So it's I like the writing to be approachable, to be lighthearted, to be, he's fairly glib and kind of a real smart ass. So I don't know where he gets that. So, but yeah, I think that, that my career as a newspaper reporter and editor kind of informs all that.
Thank you.
So I know plotter and pantser, and it's always surprising to hear somebody who does like mystery or suspense being a pantser. How do you know that? I know you start with the first sentence, but there's so much woven into suspense and mystery. How do you do that without a general kind of plan of how it's going to end?
very inefficient.
So you go through a lot of drafts?
I do a lot of rewriting.
Yeah.
Since I don't know what's going to happen, it's difficult to foreshadow. In fact,
Yeah.
I would dare say it's impossible to foreshadow. So, but that's part of mysteries, right? Because you want to be dropping these
Right.
little clues in so that when they pop up, they all make sense. It's got to tie together at the end.
Yeah, yeah.
So, outlining it where you think through all of these steps along the way certainly is the most organized and efficient way to do it. Unfortunately, I don't have a brain for that. I guess I just tell people I'm not smart enough to do that because I don't know what's going to happen until it happens. And
Okay.
so I end up doing, I revise, I spend as much time every day rewriting as I spend writing. When I'm writing a book, as I am now, I get what I call in my factory mode. Most mystery novels are around the range of 90,000 words. That's what mine generally are. Thrillers would be bigger, like 120,000 words. Some are longer. But I try to write around 90,000 words, and I try to write 1,000 words a day. So it takes me 90 days to write the first draft of the book. But that first draft, by the time it gets down to the last chapter, has been rewritten 3 or 4 times as I go along to address just that issue. That's a really good question because I'm constantly having to revise, go back, make sure it all ties together. And then I have several very trusted readers who are not afraid to tell me when I don't know what I'm doing, which is fairly easy for them to do, in which they say, this doesn't fit here, that doesn't make sense there, let's
Okay.
fix that. That it takes a lot more policing. So it's not, you're right, it's not a very efficient way to do it. And if I had James Patterson's mind and money, I would do it this way.
Well, you've got 5 books, so you're doing something right.
Yeah.
We have probably time for another question before we...
There you go. Yes.
Since you don't know what your characters are going to do before they do it, what's the most surprising thing that you had a character do?
You know,
Or the most unexpected?
that's a really good question. I'd have to think about that. But almost every day they kind of surprise me because I really don't know where the story's going to go until it starts going. And then once they do something, it's like in the book I'm writing now, Alexander Strange comes back aboard his boat. He's been up all night. They've been chasing thieves who robbed a nativity scene and in the process decapitated baby Jesus when they ripped him out of the manger, right? So he's tired, he's exhausted, and he gets back to his boat and he's like delirious from weariness. And his he lives with a mannequin. His mannequin, whose name is Mona, starts talking to him. I don't know what she's going to tell him next, but I got a feeling it's going to be very, very strange. So there's a lot of surprises all the time. Well, thank y'all. Y'all have been very kind.
Let everyone know your booth in case people
Yeah,
want to stop by.
I mean, booth 101, as you come in the door, you'll see me right there. And if you don't see me, you'll see my lovely wife, who is there right now, selling books. They're flying off the shelves, so you better get there fast, I'll tell you. So anyway, thank you all.
Thank you.
Lovely.